समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है, अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है, अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
आप समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Donald Trump's key aide, Pete Navarro, has once again lashed out at India and Prime Minister Modi, saying that it's a shame to see Prime Minister Modi, quote unquote, in bed with Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. In fact, he's gone one step further to say Modi needs to be with us, i.e. America, and not with Russia. Navarro has become probably the second most unpopular global figure in India, closely following Donald Trump, who once again spoke about relations with India being a one-sided disaster. He also claimed that India was ready to cut tariffs to virtually nothing, something India has not said, but Trump claimed it was too late. After the SCO summit that saw a power huddle between Modi, Xi Jinping, and Putin, what happens to India-US relations? We'll be talking to a leading global analyst in a moment from now. I'm Barkha Dutt. You're with the Mojo Story. These images out of China are creating global ripples. Our part of the world sometimes doesn't get the attention it deserves in Western media. But these were images that the Western media and the Western world could not ignore. The power huddle between Putin, Xi Jinping, and Modi, of course, is sending a signal to Donald Trump. But there are substantive questions that remain. Is this really a new axis, or is this more symbolic than substantive? The Prime Minister on his return certainly had a dig for Donald Trump. Trump had referred to the Indian economy as a dead economy. Prime Minister Modi cited the latest GDP figures to make the point that despite what he called economic selfishness, India had more than held her own. In the meantime, at the SCO summit, Pakistan had not just its Prime Minister but also its Field Marshal Asim Munir present, leading many to wonder what happens now to the Pakistan-China nexus given the cautiously improved relations between India and China. A lot to talk about on a day when former NSA of the United States of America, Jake Sullivan, has said that Trump threw aside ties with India to protect his family's business interests with Pakistan. Let me introduce our guests on the program today. Michael Kugelman joins us. He's a South policy columnist with foreign policy and one of the world's leading global analysts on this part of the world. Michael, it's good to see you. Tell me what you thought after you saw those images coming out of China.
Well, you know that optics are so important in international diplomacy and international affairs today. And I think the one that really stood out for me was Prime Minister Modi standing next to President Xi and President Putin, with the three of them smiling. They may have been talking about something very mundane, but I think that it's just projects this very powerful image at a moment when India is under tremendous pressure to stop doing business with Russia. Here he is standing next to his friend Putin. Here is the Prime Minister standing next to his friend Putin, all while also standing next to the leader of the country that is America's top strategic competitor, and a country that India, I would argue, has a strong motivation to try to ease tensions with, which of course is a pattern that's been playing out for more than a year. So all in all, that single image alone, I think, was really resonated in a big way and has resonated around the world.
We've seen three kinds of reactions from the United States of America. A somewhat muddled reaction from the president, who spoke about India's trade relations being what he called a one-sided disaster. He also claimed, with no substantiation from the Indian side, that India had offered to cut tariffs to virtually nothing, but it was too late. Then you had dissent, a key official in the Trump administration talking about how two great countries are going to get this solved. So that seemed more conciliatory language. And then you had Peter Navarro, who, of course, has been making one, Indians would say, crazy statement after the other, including calling Russia's invasion of Ukraine Modi's war. And today he used the phrase, it was shameful to see Modi in bed with Xi Jinping and Putin. Indians will turn around and say Trump was just hosting Putin in Alaska. So who's he to talk? What's going on? Are there multiple voices? Is the Trump administration not on the same page? Is this good cop, bad cop? What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really the last suggestion that you made, a good cop, bad cop routine. Clearly, Peter Navarro is playing the role of the bad cop to try to keep applying those pressure tactics against India, which clearly are not going to work. And then, indeed, you do have some administration officials who have been taking a bit of a softer approach. And also, as you likely saw, the U.S. Embassy in New Delhi, its ex-handler recently posted a message celebrating U.S.-India partnership, which I think we can all agree sounds a bit tone deaf right now. But seen that there are some elements of the U.S. government, including at the State Department, that want to try to engage in damage control. But one could argue that it's a bit late for that at this time.
I want to try and understand that U.S. Embassy tweet. I think we have it somewhere if we can pull it up, talking about how relations were reaching new heights between two countries on the same day that Modi was interlinking hands with Putin and, all smiles with China. Is it that the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing in the Trump administration? Is it that at the level of officials and bureaucrats, they're still trying to contain the damage, whereas Trump has a mind of his own? There's a political official divide here. How do you read it?
I mean, I do think there is something to be said for this idea that President Trump and his closest aides at the White House, which include Peter Navarro, are really taking the hardest of lines, and that you have elements, leaders elsewhere in the U.S. government, including at the State Department, that genuinely want to limit the damage to this relationship that has been inflicted in great part by the words and actions of the White House, including the president. So maybe we're seeing that tension play out here. And I think a broader question, moving forward, is how much will these messages and actions of the president hold the relationship hostage, right? I mean, I think if we're going to talk about possibilities for somehow getting this relationship back on track, you're going to need the State Department, the Defense Department, other agencies that work closely with India. They're going to need to gain the upper hand here, because it does not seem like Navarro and Trump and others like them are in any mood to let up on what has become, quite frankly, a case of daily insults being directed against India, supposedly a top strategic partner. Now, you highlight this tweet here from Secretary of State Rubio, which sounds tone deaf. Maybe this is meant to be some type of reaction to the optic of Modi standing with Putin and Xi. I'm not sure. This might have been planned well in advance. But I would note this, that my sense is that Washington probably did not really have much of a reaction to this image of these three leaders standing together. One reason for that is, we don't yet know what Trump wants to do about China. Right? It is a strategic competitor of the U.S., but there has not yet been a coherent policy coming from the Trump administration about what it wants to do with China. Sometimes it talks about wanting to pursue competition. Other times it talks about wanting to pursue some type of cooperation. So the idea of Modi going to China and meeting with President Xi may not register. It may not upset Washington as much as it might have, 3 or 5 or 8 years ago.
And I'll come to whether Trump himself might be looking to cut a deal with China in a moment. But let's talk about what's the way forward, if any, for India and the United States of America. I think you said it rightly, that it's become a case of almost daily insults about India. And I think that's how, Indians across political affiliations are now seeing it. My question to you is, there have been some suggestions that Modi and Trump need to meet on the sidelines of the UNGA. Others are saying that the problem is in a breakdown of chemistry between Modi and Trump, that a 17th June phone call between the two leaders was particularly acrimonious, and that in the end, Trump, while being flattered by Pakistan, is piqued by India refusing to publicly give him any credit for a role in Operation Sindoor that India says he did not play. How do you see it? If this is Trump actually sulking with Modi, how does Modi meeting Trump or Modi talking to Trump make it better?
I mean, ordinarily, I would not expect to be saying that a U.S. president's sense of grievance could actually torpedo a critical partnership. But I do think that is a big part of what's going on, which suggests that it could be difficult to get the relationship back on track. You've rightly noted that Trump was not happy that India did not let him claim credit for a role in the ceasefire with Pakistan. And indeed, the phone call that he had with Prime Minister Modi in June, I doubt went down well with Trump either. As I understand it, Prime Minister Modi spent several minutes telling Trump how wrong he was about the U.S. role in the ceasefire. I also think that Trump was not pleased that Prime Minister Modi did not accept his invitation to stop by the White House after Modi had been at the G7 summit in Canada. That's because Modi likely thought that he would be forced to meet with the Pakistani army chief who was in town at the time. And I also think that President Trump was upset that India was not willing to make all of the concessions that he was expecting India to make in the trade talks. Of course, in the very end, India did make a number of concessions, but it did draw the line in some places. So I do think there's a sense of grievance here. And indeed, the much ballyhooed bromance between Trump and Modi, which I think is maybe been a bit overstated over the years, that's really come to an end, and that could make things difficult. You're right that there's been talk about the two men meeting to clear the air on the sidelines of the UNGA. I don't know if Prime Minister Modi plans to make that trip. If he does, I don't know if either leader would be willing to have that meeting. But that does become more important, given that it appears now, based on recent reportage, that the Quad Leaders Summit meeting scheduled for this year most likely will not happen, which means that President Trump would not go to India and would not have that opportunity to meet with Prime Minister Modi then. So coming back to what I said before, it's all about the issue of whether Trump himself and those close to him will hold the relationship hostage, or if you could continue to have engagement and cooperation between the State Department, DOD, even throughout the crisis, they have continued to cooperate, right? A few weeks ago, they launched a joint satellite. There was a 2+2 dialogue online, not that high level, a few days ago. So, they do continue to engage, but I think it's the trust factor that's been lost. The U.S. has squandered so much trust in New Delhi, and that is what I think will be difficult to recapture to get the relationship back on track.
Absolutely. I think there's a sense in India that multipolarity is the only investment that's going to be worth it in the years to come. And certainly Trump has another 3 years to go at minimum, and that, you can't just sit that period out as a major power in the world. Here's my question. There's a lot of speculation over why Trump has suddenly turned soft on Pakistan. If you remember Trump's public statements when he was in his first term, they're very different from what seems to be the approach now. And as you mentioned, Modi declined his invitation to go to Washington because Pakistan's army chief, Asim Munir, was in Washington on the same day. No Indian prime minister would have accepted that invitation in that context. We have a statement from US former NSA Jake Sullivan suggesting that Trump's softness on Pakistan has something to do with his family's business ties to Pakistan's cryptocurrency council. How do you see this statement?
Well, I mean, as you would well know, Pakistan has always been very good about pitching itself to Washington as helpful and as a useful partner. I think it plays Washington very well in that sense. And that includes a case like now where you have a very unconventional president. And so what has Pakistan done? It has essentially dangled these opportunities for partnership to the Trump administration, emphasizing the type of issues that are of great interest to the Trump administration globally. So, Pakistan has dangled this opportunity to invest in Pakistan's critical minerals. It very suddenly established a crypto council, very soon after Trump took office. And Pakistan said, look, let's cooperate on crypto. And indeed, it is true that you have an American crypto company that has Trump's two older sons, a part of it, and that crypto company has engaged with Pakistan's crypto council. So here's another important element that Pakistan has been able to tap into and really capitalize on the importance that Trump places on personal and family ties, right? I mean, Pakistan knows that if you start engaging with those very close to Trump, including close family members, that could help the relationship. This is a very unconventional diplomatic approach for a country to take. Pakistan is not afraid to engage in those very unconventional tactics, and I think many other countries, including India, have chosen, understandably so, to just stick with what's conventional when it comes to diplomacy. So, yeah, it's remarkable how far things have come in so little time with U.S.-Pakistan relations. I wouldn't overstate just how far this relationship with Pakistan can go, but I think that at the end of the day, Pakistan is essentially, it's pitched itself as a partner to work with the Trump administration on the issues that really generate a lot of passion in Trump's Washington.
Now, what is the way back, if any, from this impasse? Modi today on his return from China at a public event, the images of which you're seeing on your screen, made it a point to reinforce the growth figures, the GDP figures just out for the quarter gone by, obviously as a counter to Trump's sort of churlish remark about India being a dead economy alongside Russia. Modi has previously said that even if he has to pay a personal price, he's ready to pay that. Nobody quite knows what he meant, but that's what he said. Now, given the position India has taken, and given the position Trump has taken, how does this sort of impasse end or even thaw?
Well, I mean, I think if we want to talk about the state of the trade relationship and that impasse, that's going to be very difficult to break, just because I think that for political reasons, Indian negotiators would be very unlikely to make any further concessions to the United States if trade talks resume. But, the U.S. position, I think, will remain very maximalist and hardline, and that it would expect India to make the concessions that it has not made to this point. And as you know, that entails opening up these very sensitive sectors, agriculture and so on. So that's not in a good place right now. So, my sense is that, we're going to start seeing from New Delhi efforts to try to limit the possible damage coming from the tariffs that have kicked in India by looking to secure market access elsewhere. It's been negotiating a trade deal with the EU for a number of months. I suspect that New Delhi will redouble attention to get a deal there. As you know, the EU, like the US, is a top export destination for Indian goods. And I think we'll see India, quite frankly, explore broadening the commercial partnership with China. I don't want to overstate this reset between India and China. There are a lot of limitations there, given, among other things, China's alliance with Pakistan and the disputed border between India and China. But I think that's something else that we're going to see India do. I don't expect this trade crisis, this trade war between the U.S. and India to end anytime soon, particularly if the two leaders are not going to be in a position, most likely, to meet face-to-face or even over the phone to say, look, let's try to make this happen. Let's break the impasse. I don't see any opportunity coming anytime soon for that to happen.
I'd agree with that. And we have a statement from the Indian Commerce Minister saying that the India-EU free trade agreement talks are in an advanced stage. But in the meantime, there's also been some reporting that the White House has been pressuring European nations to also impose quote-unquote sanctions on India like it has. How do you think that push is going to go?
Well, I mean, the double standards here are extraordinary, right? I mean, we know that the number of European states are still importing Russian energy, so it's extraordinary. I don't anticipate that would go very well. I mean, I think that the Trump administration's position of penalizing India for its oil imports from Russia is what I would describe as an extreme position that I don't think European states, particularly India's very close partners in Europe, would want to sign on to at all. So I think that's quite unlikely. And you look at a country like France, which is one of India's closest partners and has been for some time. That's the last thing we would want to get involved in. Same with the UK, Germany. These are very important partners. So I think that the Europeans are very unhappy with a lot of the policies that the Trump administration is carrying out, and that idea of threatening sanctions on India, I think, is among those that most of the EU states plus the UK would not agree with.
So let's come to China. I think I agree with you that there's very little, there's very little instinctive trust with China. Not just, I'm talking from an Indian perspective, not just because of what happened in Galwan, but because of the China-Pakistan nexus, because of the Chinese support for Pakistan in Operation Sindoor. That said, I think there is so much anger in India right now about, how Trump is behaving, that most Indians are seeing a kind of counter move. It's like, my enemy's enemy is my friend, a sort of dynamic unfolding here in China. And I think Indians are seeing in these images an assertion of India's sovereign right to forge its own foreign policy, to forge its own economic decisions. How do you see geopolitics being upended? I agree with you that the trade impasse isn't going to break soon. India will look for alternative markets, life will go on. But international relations will change, at least in the medium term.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we could talk about the optics associated with these images from China, but I think that there are some very notable implications for the world order that are worth keeping in mind. I said this on X the other day, both this SCO summit and the BRICS summit in Russia last year, I think showcased just how much anger and discontent there is around the world, particularly in the global South, about U.S. leadership, U.S. policies in the world, U.S.-led economic mechanisms. SCO, like BRICS, are meant to serve as counters to U.S.-led and Western-led models. And I think that given this tariffs policy from the Trump administration, I think that this global discontent that I'm talking about is only going to deepen. And that would benefit groups like SCO and BRICS, which have been talk shops for most of their existence, quite frankly. But I think that they could now have the motivation to try to start doing bigger and better things. I think BRICS now might have more of a motivation to try to finally come up with something, whether it's a BRICS bank or something that could conceivably undercut the US dollar. Of course, Trump has threatened to place tariffs on the BRICS countries because he fears that this could happen. This could be a self-fulfilling prophecy that, he's saying he's worried about BRICS posing a threat to the US dollar, so he wants to pose tariffs on them. That wasn't going to happen. But then now that the BRICS states know that they could be in the crosshairs, that could make them even more inclined to want to, really develop those type of structures that can counter the dollar. And most of the BRICS states would not want to undercut the dollar because of how dependent they are on it. But given how bad things have become, particularly in terms of the US and India, we can't rule out these very nice reflections of multipolarity at the SCO and the BRICS, trying to do substantive things to counter the US and its Western partners in ways that we haven't seen.
Let me ask you this. You spoke about extraordinary double standards in the Trump administration's response. The biggest example of that is that China purchases more oil from Russia than India does, and the Americans can't sanction China because China has choke points, rare earth material. Also, Trump wants to kind of deal with China. And I want you to join the dots to your earlier statement that maybe Trump isn't as exercised about the meeting between Modi and Xi as America once would have been. What's going on with China and the US?
Yeah, well, I mean, as you know, President Trump has had a call with President Xi since he came back to office. And after that, he said on Truth Social that he wants to work with China to promote peace and security. I think that for Trump, the biggest worry is that the U.S. would get dragged into some type of conflict that involves China. And that's the last thing he wants. I mean, say what you will about Trump, but he doesn't want to start wars. I mean, he's trying to end wars. He doesn't want the U.S. involved in wars. So I think that he would like to be able to create enough space in the relationship with China, enough diplomatic space where you wouldn't have to worry about that type of thing happening. But it's hard to say. You could look at so many examples where the administration has indicated that it still is competing very hard with China. For example, the controversial decision on the part of the Trump administration to ease sanctions on some generals in Myanmar in order to make it easier for the U.S. to access rare earths there so that China is not getting hold of these rare earths. So that's one data point. It's just very difficult to say. But, I think that because, and I mentioned this before, I think, because we shouldn't expect this India-China détente to go that far, I think that might be another reason why President Trump and Washington aren't all that bothered by these scenes from China. Just focus on other things, and also, this is not going to become the type of relationship where you're going to have a special partnership between India and China. I mean, these are strategic competitors. That's going to remain the case for a while. And I suspect that Trump's aides have told him that as well. But we don't know what's going to happen yet with China.
Would they have been more bothered about by the images of Putin and Modi?
Perhaps so. I mean, Trump has always, or not always, in recent years, he's taken a much more moderate view of Putin and Russia than the Democrats and Joe Biden did. I think that the main reason why the Trump administration is unhappy with India for its Russia dealings is not because of its relationship with Russia. It's all through the commercial lens because of India's oil imports from Russia. As I said, it's not all that. It's also the sense of grievance that Trump has. So maybe the Russian oil imports are being used as a pretext. But I don't think that Trump would have any issue with the India-Russia relationship. It's more the fact that they're doing business together. But yeah, if there's going to be any upset in Washington about any of these images, I think you're more likely to see that upset with Modi and Putin. And it's notable that not only were they seen hugging and all that, but they're having that very that intimate moment together in the car. And
in the car,
that was an extra gesture right there, just to send an extra signal back to Washington about just how close these two men are.
Yeah, I think India was basically saying to Trump, we've got options. That's how I see the entire power play at the SCO Summit. Finally, what next? You think the trade impasse can't be broken? India isn't going to suddenly start flattering Trump or addressing his personal grievances. The New York Times confirms reporting by a German newspaper and an Indian newspaper that the White House wanted Trump and Modi to get onto the call. And India was circumspect about that because people no longer trust how Trump is going to handle, a confidential conversation between two leaders. Is he going to distort it? Is he going to put it out on Truth Social? Is he then going to leave India denying it? Nobody wants to be in that position. So it's reached a kind of total communication breakdown at the top.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a total paralysis. And in different circumstances, you'd think that these two leaders could draw on their personal relationship to end the impasse. But that's essentially been shattered as well. I mean, the personal relationship is no more. And I think what's even more concerning is that people ties are starting to be impacted. I mean, these new constraints on foreign students coming to the U.S., which would affect Indian students, the controversy around the H-1B visa program, which, as you know, is something that really benefits Indian workers. So if you have the strategic partnership is in trouble, trade relations are in trouble, the leader relationship is in trouble, and people-to-people ties are in trouble. What does that leave you? So I think this is very concerning. And as deep and multifaceted as this relationship is, I think we could be entering a period of deep freeze that it's not going to completely collapse. But I think it's going to be very difficult to get it back to where it was just a few months ago.
And is it the end of the Quad?
Well, I mean, the Quad can only function if the four members of it are all on good terms. This is not a large multilateral organization of dozens of countries where you can deal with a bilateral dispute, right? You're talking about half the grouping with their relationship on the rocks. So I don't want to say it's done, but I think it's certainly imperiled. And indeed, if the Quad Leader Summit doesn't happen this year, that's really a very bad sign. And by extension, that would be another big blow to U.S.-India relations.
Well, you say we're entering a period of deep freeze. I tend to increase, but what we're certainly entering is a period of absolute volatility and uncertainty. I think we can't predict. I don't think I would have been able to predict 8 months ago that there would be this moment between Modi, Putin, and Xi Jinping in China. And so, we're at a point where all bets are off, and it is a prolonged, in my opinion, phase of uncertainty. A lot of balls up in the air. Michael Kugelman, always a pleasure talking to you. Hope to see you again soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.